Alright, hi. I've just recently fitted a little 110cc engine to this fine C90 here. A few little bits and bobs we noticed as we was doing it, so thought we'd make this handy little video just to help you out if something you're thinking of doing yourselves. First things, obviously, the C90 engines. As you can see, they're quite small. They're not particularly big, they're not overly heavy, they're a nice light thing. You're better off if you can have someone help you when you're fitting it, because they can get a bit heavy when you're trying to put the bolts in when you're holding with one arm, but it is a job you can do on your own. A few things to look out for. These are obviously the later 12 volt models. They have a CDI type ignition rather than the old-fashioned contact breakers. Very, very simple engine. Simply a flywheel sits on the end of the crankshaft here that spins round at engine speed. Bolt in the middle. If you take the bolt off, you have to use a special flywheel pulling tool. The flywheel will come off. It's got a lot of magnets in there, so it might just need a bit of tugging. And it has behind it a couple of coils of wire here. One of these, most likely this big chunky one, will run the lighting and charge the battery, and this smaller one will be charging the CDI box in between sparks. There's a little nub here on the flywheel. It just spins round and passes very close to this magnetic pickup to tell the CDI when to spark. And obviously, because this is important, there's a small cutout in the flywheel which goes on this key here on the end of the crankshaft, so you can't put the flywheel on wrong. You can't hold the ignition timer on these. It makes the job very easy. Reason I tell you that is because not all these Chinese engines have both the coils in them for lighting. Some of them just have the small coil for the ignition. So if you do get one which doesn't have both the coils in it, you can actually take the one off your original Honda engine, as long as you've still got one. Two small screws sitting here. You'll have to use an impact driver to undo them. While you just mangle the heads up, impact driver will undo them straight away. This simply pulls off. There's rubber seal here in the middle. You need to make sure you don't damage, and around the outside of it here. And there's two small rubber seals. They're not on this engine, but they sit behind the screws here. If any of them are damaged or missing, you will leak a lot of oil out there when the engine's running, so you need to be careful there. Other things, the Chinese engines, some of them they actually supply them even new out the box with a manifold. If you brought one off an old pit bike or something, it'll have a manifold and carb. You're going to be very lucky if you can use it, as the manifolds are very small. If you rest it on the engine here, you can see it's barely a finger's width above the engine. The carburetor would never fit onto that manifold. The C90 manifold is a lot higher. On the pit bikes, the manifold usually sits backwards to what a C90 does, which might look like a great idea, but on the C90 that will not get in the frame. The frame will get in the way of that. So the simplest way around this is whatever carbon manifold yours come with, you can use. Obviously a 90 is best. I think some of the 70s actually have a bigger one on, but I'm not sure on that. But yeah, C90 carb will bolt straight on, give you the correct orientation of the manifold and everything, so that's the easiest thing to do. Something else to look out for is on these charging coils. Depending on what model of C90 you have, some of them will have these round connectors on them, some of them will have a square plug. It's always best, if you're going to use the one that's on the Chinese engine and it's got different plug on it to what your C90's got, don't chop the wiring loom off your C90, leave that as standard, chop the one on the engine. If you're going to swap the stator plate over, it doesn't matter what's on there because it will end up being the correct plug for your engine. You can't really see it on the camera, but this one actually says 6V on there. This was a 110cc Lonsin engine. It's actually got 6 volt charging coils in it, much thicker wire, much beefier current coil, but it'll run on a 12 volt quite happily. You just need a few more revs to get the lights to light up brightly, so if you're sat in traffic or something, at that moment in time your battery won't be charging and your lights will be dim, but it doesn't matter on the C90 because the engine electrics to run the engine aren't connected to the battery. So the 6 volt, there's no reference to the CDI power, it's just for the battery charging the lights whilst you're going along. It's not a problem, so don't worry about it. This one did many miles on a C90. never a problem. Didn't break a regulator, didn't fry a battery, didn't hurt the generator, so don't worry about it. Few things to look out for. On the C90 engines, this side casing has a casting in it here where the foot pegs come up from. The exhaust will sit about where my finger is, and the foot pegs curve up from under the engine and come out. Obviously the Chinese manufacturers love these little engines and they start putting them on everything. Then someone else has got their hands on them, done a bit of a rework on them to make them a bit more sturdier inside for the pit bikes. And some of the ones you'll try and buy now brand new on eBay or on an old pit bike will be a lot wider side panel here. It'll just come down flat. It will not have this. And it'll usually have a dipstick up here. One of them obviously won't bolt straight on a C90. I suppose if you could make some foot pegs up or something you could do it, but I've never tried it, so I don't know. But yeah, a real simple little engine. Engine change is dead simple. On the bike itself there's just 2 bolts which go through here and here. Once you've took all the manifold, unplugged the wiring and the exhaust and everything off, take the foot pegs off as it's still on the bike so you've got something to undo the bolts against. There's simply 2 bolts that go through the frame both sides and through the engine here. Undo the nuts on the right hand side of them, and this is where it's best to get someone to hold the engine whilst you pull, just wiggle the engine a bit as you pull both bolts out, and the engine will just drop out. Real dead simple, and obviously the other one goes in reverse of fitting. Kickstart, these Chinese engines, they're usually this long straight one, and although on the bench it appears it'll work, if you try to put it on the bike it'll never kick past the side panel. If it did, it wouldn't clear the exhaust. The Honda one has to have a curve in it coming out. So yeah, same again, lots of bits for these Chinese engines. If you don't have an engine on your C90, don't count on thinking you're going to be able to just buy a Chinese pit bike and transplant the engine. You're going to need a few bits and bobs to do it. If you've got a C90 engine, it's not a problem. Everything will just come off your C90 engine, go straight on this one. So go to the bike now. This is a brand new engine off eBay, out the crate. This is a Lifan engine. It's a 107cc, but it's called a 110. 4-speed semi-auto, which is quite nice. The C90s only have 3-speed. That 4th gear does make a difference. This one's a backwards to C90. All gears are up. It's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th up, and then press on the top of the lever down, whereas obviously the C90 is 1, 2, 3. Come with its own engine casing, which we did intend on changing, but when we went to put it on the bike, the Honda one that is, there's quite a large flywheel on this, and the sprocket seems to be in a slightly different location to a C90 engine. We couldn't get a Honda one on. Use a Lifan one. I kind of like the way it looks, and there's no chain guard on this bike at the minute. We're working on that in a minute. We've got a couple of bent ones, but when the chain guard goes on, there's going to be a gap at the front of the chain guard and the back of the engine. Not a major problem, a bit of dirt and stuff will get up in there, but this has been running without a chain guard now for a couple of 1,000 miles. Lots of bikes do, so if you don't like the look of the gap you can always leave your chain guard off, but I wouldn't recommend that because it does shorten the life of your chain. Should your chain snap, it's nice to have a chain guard. It means there's less chance of the chain possibly whipping round you. Just whilst we're here, this is kind of funny. This is my brother's bike. He's quite a large lad, he weighs over 20 stone. These shock absorbers are off an old Suzuki GS250 I used to have. We did absolutely nothing to this bike to get them to fit. Didn't even have to swap the rubbers in the shock absorbers. They bolted straight on. They're a bit longer than the 90 units, but they're a lot heavier duty. And they certainly raised the back end a lot when Bill sat on it. And I've noticed when I ride this one, it's a much comfier ride having a set of decent shock absorbers on it that soak up the bumps a bit more. So if you're ever bored one night and you've got a few quid spare, it's worth having a knock around on eBay. Probably lots of different models of old bike shocks that'll fit. I think I paid a tenner for a replacement second-hand set. They were just a little less rusty, so you don't have to splash out a great amount of money. If we come to the right of the bike here, see what I was on about with the kickstart. See this curve in it here. If I tried to use the straight one, it would never have gone past the side panel when I kicked it, and it would certainly wouldn't allow me to kick past the exhaust. And once again, this is see where the foot peg comes up. See obviously this casting in the engine casing here allows for these to come up. If it wasn't here, you'd have to have your foot pegs coming up round and outside the exhaust, which would take some cutting and welding to do. Same again, clutch adjustments in the middle of the engine on this. It's a very close copy to original C90 engine. Yeah, I think we should strike her up and listen to her run. She come with some oil in the engine. And there was a note from the eBay seller saying to drop the oil out of the engine before you first run it. The oil that was in the engine smelled like vegetable oil. It wasn't really a good engine oil. I don't think it is engine oil. I think it's just a shipping oil to stop corrosion. So it never got run with that oil in. It got dropped out and some proper bike oil put in it. So worth noting, it's a new engine. You don't want to bugger it up with shitty oil. Otherwise you need to run it in. So we're in neutral. A little bit of choke. No compression. As you can see, didn't change the stator or charging coils on this one. The one that come on the engine worked just fine. The engine's dead quiet, which really is a nice engine. Only done about 100 miles so far. But yeah, it certainly is certainly got a lot more power than the C90 engine. You can feel as you're just initially pulling away on a little bit of throttle. Come with a 4-in-2 sprocket on it. This is an old electric start. Is it MG model C90, this one? As you can see in the fairing here, there's the cutout for where the electric start mechanism should go through. There's the old electric start engine under the bench somewhere. So yeah, I forgot what I was on about just then. Oh, that's right, yeah, this should have a 15-tooth sprocket on it. I've got new chain sprockets to put on this, but the engine comes with a 14-tooth. Which is actually alright for running it in, because you can guarantee if you're not revving the engine, you're not working the engine because it's geared it down a little bit. But yeah, that'll get changed for a 15 when she's running, because I want to see how fast it'll go, and it's just going to be revving quite hard at about 50 with that 14-tooth on. So yeah, that's about it. If you've got any questions, just feel free to leave comments on the YouTube page. Yeah, that's all I can think of.
Did you change any electrics on the bike itself?
Oh no, this one's this is standard. The stator on this one plugs straight in. It even had the round connections on it. So
what about the CDI or the ignition coil on the bike?
No, everything on the bike is standard. These engines will pretty much just plug straight in and ride. So yeah.
And this light is fucking hot.